Hello and welcome back to the Architectury multi-platform modding series for Minecraft. And in the last episode we added the block entity for a Ruby crate with the correct container configuration so that we can use a Ruby crate as a storage block like a chest. And in this episode we are going to do the same with a Ruby furnace by transforming a Ruby furnace into, well, a working furnace so that it works like a regular vanilla furnace. So the first thing we need to do is to create a tile entity for a Ruby furnace. And for this, we are going to our entities package inside of our blocks package, where we created the Ruby crate entity in the last episode. And here we're going to create a new class and call it the Ruby furnace entity. And this Ruby furnace entity now extends because we want to create a furnace. Minecraft provides us with a base class that we can use for this called abstract furnace block entity, and we can extend this class so that we don't need to write a lot of the code, because a lot of the things a furnace needs to do is already handled here. We still need to implement a few methods, and we also need to create a constructor. And the first thing we have, similar to last time, we have a getDefaultName component method that provides us with the name that will be displayed in the menu later. And here we again can do component.translatable and put in a key here like container.tutorial tutorial_mod.ruby_furnace. And we then also can go to our assets lang folder and put in this string here so that it is translated later in the game. So similar to every time, the key and then the value here. And with that, we have a name in our menu. We still need to create this menu, and for this, the create menu method down here. And here we want to create a new furnace menu because we want the default furnace GUI to open up, because we want to create a basic furnace for now. So in here we need to provide the container ID, which is given as a parameter in this method, the inventory, which is the player inventory. Then we need to pass the container of the furnace, which is this tile entity here. And then we need to provide this data access component, which is handled by the abstract furnace block entity for us, so we don't need to do anything in relation to this. We now want to modify the constructor because we don't want to pass over the block entity type, because we want to hardcode this, and we don't want to pass the recipe type here. The type will come back to that later because we haven't registered that yet, but the recipe type for now we are just going to put in here recipe type.smelting, so that the Ruby furnace accepts the same recipes and behaves the same way as a regular furnace block. Now we need to register the tile entity, and for this we go to our entity types class and create a new registry supplier here. And similar to the last time, we are not able to register it from here, but we need to go to our Fabric and Neoforge specific classes and initialize our Ruby furnace through here. So we do Ruby_furnace and then call our register block entity method for our Ruby furnace and pass a new block entity type for our Ruby furnace entity, Ruby furnace entity with the new, and then we get our Ruby furnace from the blocks. And in a similar way, we need to do this for Fabric. So also here, register block entity, and then use the Fabric block entity type builder as in the last episode, and then our Ruby furnace entity with the new. As you can see here, it marks this as protected because we generated this through the IntelliJ, and default is protected for the constructor, so we need to obviously put public here so that this works without a problem. So with that, we have a block entity type registered, and then we can go here and put down tutorial mod block entity types dot rubyfurnace.get. And that is everything we need to do to create a Ruby furnace entity. We now need to associate this entity with a Ruby furnace block, because as of now, a Ruby furnace block is just a directional block. And again, Minecraft is helpful in providing us a little bit of help so that we don't need to write much of the code ourselves. And that is that Minecraft provides us with the abstract furnace block, which again handles most of the furnace specific code, especially regarding some animation stuff, and particularly also the block state changes for facing and the lid value, which is the texture change in the front when the furnace starts to burn. And we don't need to do a lot of those things ourselves by just extending the abstract furnace block here. We also can already go ahead and implement our right-click block interaction event, because we want to open the menu, of course, and for that we need to listen to the right-click block interaction event. Now for the codec, again, we need to change the directional block here to the abstract furnace block so that this works. And now, as you can see, we are still missing a lot of things. So let's implement all the methods that we need for this block to work. And that's everything for this. So I'm going to move the open container method down here so that it's a bit more ordered. And we can also now delete the mirror, rotate, and get state for placement methods, because those are now handled by our abstract furnace block, so we no longer need to specify those. And we also don't need to create the block state definition ourselves. That is also handled through the abstract furnace block. What we can also do, instead of registering the default state, this is also something done through the abstract furnace block. We can go in here and register our interaction event dot right click block dot register this, so that the right click block action is actually performed when we right click our Ruby furnace. Now we can implement the methods. So let's start with the new block entity. Here we just create a new Ruby furnace entity for a block pos and state. Then we need to go ahead and implement the click method, which I've already prepared, which we will do in this way. So similar to last time, we first check if we have a Ruby furnace entity, and if we have it and we are not pressing down shift, in both cases we would pass the interaction event. Then we open the menu of this block entity and then say that it was successful. Next, we need to implement the open container method, which we do like this. So we first get our block entity and then check if our block entity is an abstract furnace block entity, which it is in this case because our block entity extends abstract furnace block entity. And then we open the menu on this block entity. And we also, in this case, award the stat that the player interacted with a furnace. If you don't want to do that, you can just delete it like this. Now we need two more things in here, which are not technically required, but are nice to have and really needed. And the first of this is that we want to override get ticker. As I've shown you in an earlier episode, a ticker is something that ticks every tick, as the name suggests, to check if the state of the block entity has changed and if some action should be performed. And this is especially important for a furnace, because for the furnace we need to check every tick if we have a valid recipe in the container, and then we need to start the burning and we need to start the processing of the item and the recipe inside of our furnace. So instead of just going through the super method here, we are going to call create furnace ticker, which is a method again provided by the abstract furnace block. And then here we want to pass the level, the block entity type, and then we want to specify again the block entity type, which is our block entity types, and then Ruby furnace.get. That is everything we want to do in the get ticker method. And last but not least, we also want to override the animate tick method. In this method, we will put all the code that is relevant for the particle effects when the furnace is active and burning, and I've just copied over the code that is in the vanilla furnace itself, because we also use the same texture, so the particle positions are identical. And if the state is lit, so if we are in a lit block state, then we get a few positions here and then play a sound and spawn some particles. Now with that, we have our furnace block with an associated tile entity. And with that, we now just need two more things, and that is that until now our furnace is just a directional block, but we now also have the lit block state. So we need to modify our Blockstates file and also create a new model for our lit furnace. So let's start with that by copying our Ruby furnace JSON and calling it Ruby underscore furnace underscore lit.json. And I've named the texture, as I've shown you in the episode where we edited, Ruby furnace front lit. So we need to change the texture in front to Ruby furnace front lit here in our model file. And then we need to head to our Blockstate file for our Ruby furnace and essentially copy all the variants we have right now and paste them in this file again. And now the first half, we want to put lit equals false behind every single facing statement here. So that is for our unlit state. We use the regular Ruby furnace model. Now we do the same, but with lit equals true for the other four variants we have here. And in those four variants, we want to use our lit model, so we need to put underscore lit at the end of those four lines. And that is pretty much everything we need to do to create a basic furnace. Right now it behaves the same as the vanilla furnace, it just looks different. So let's jump in the game and see if it works. And with that, welcome to the game. As you can see, we have a Ruby furnace, we can place it down. And if we now right click this furnace, you'll see we'll open the menu similar to the regular furnace, the GUI, and then we can put our fuel, in this case coal, and something smeltable like our ruby ore in the furnace, and as you can see, it starts to burn and starts processing our ruby ore into rubies, as we will see when this processing step is finished. There we have it, our ruby, and as you can see, we have the particles spawning from the front. You can see the texture has changed. If I place the regular bean besides it, you can see we have here the lit version, here the unlit version. You can see the smoke and the flames, and it works like a furnace. So with that, you know how to add a basic furnace to the game, essentially, or how to create a block working similarly to a regular Minecraft furnace. And in the next episode, I'll be showing you how we can create a custom recipe type for a Ruby furnace so that we can create custom recipes for it. See you then.